A very good afternoon to us, esteemed speakers, viewers, and participants. A warm welcome to everyone joining us for today's live legal talk show under the broader theme of navigating FDI and cross border structuring amid global trade tension and supply chain realignment, both Indian and Indonesian perspective. Before moving any forward, I would want to introduce myself. My name is Sidharth Sharma, and I am working as a senior associate with Hammurabi and Solomon Partners, New Delhi. And it's my privilege to moderate this insightful discussion on two of the world's most rapidly emerging markets, namely India and Indonesia. Today's session features an esteemed panel of experts who bring with themselves a wealth of knowledge on our theme and have deep legal, regulatory, and transactional experience across cross border investments, trade policy, international business strategy. The insights will help us understand not only macroeconomic trends but also practical implications for investors, policy markers, and multinational enterprises. Before moving any forward, allow me to introduce the law firms that are behind today's dialogue, along with their distinguished speakers. Hammurabi and Solomon Partners is a leading law firm established in the year 2001. Over the years, Hammurabi and Solomon Partners has built a reputation for providing comprehensive legal services across a wide spectrum of practice areas. Our core areas of expertise include corporate advisory, mergers and acquisitions, data protection, compliances, litigation, arbitration, insolvency and bankruptcy, public policy, and real estate. We take pride in our team of 100 plus professionals, including 18 plus experienced partners across Pan India. They bring with themselves a diverse legal expertise to the table. Our team operates across multiple regions in India, including Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Jharkhand, Ahmedabad, Chennai, and Hyderabad. Hammurabi and Solomon Partners strives to be at the forefront of legal innovation and provides high quality legal counsel and representation in complex legal matters. Ranked among the top 15 law firms in India and with over 24 years of rich experience, Hammurabi's journey has been marked by stellar growth and recognition over the past 2 decades. Our esteemed speakers for today include Ms. Khushboo Kataruka, who is a partner at Hammurabi and Solomon Partners. Ms. Kataruka has over a decade of experience in handling civil, commercial, cyber, and criminal law domains. She is recognized for her empanelments with prestigious institutions like the NHI, NCTE, and beyond her legal prowess. She champions environmental causes, notably spearheading initiatives for water body preservation in Jharkhand. Moving forward, we have with us Ms. Thanuja Palla, who is also a partner with Hammurabi and Solomon Partners. Ms. Palla is an outstanding corporate legal professional with experience across various industries. Her expertise encompasses a wide range of corporate legal matters from company formation to managing capital restructuring, investments, and projects. She has comprehensive understanding of legal landscape. Additionally, her experience includes litigation and systematic implementation, making her a well-rounded professional in the corporate legal sector. We also have with us Mr. Srinivas Kotni, who is the founder and managing partner at Lexport. Mr. Kotni has been handling a variety of legal, corporate, and taxation issues for close to last 2 decades. Prior to setting up Lexport in 2000, he was a consultant with leading firm of attorneys specializing in areas of corporate and commercial laws, indirect taxation, and intellectual property rights. Mr. Kotni also holds professional affiliation to the Bar Councils of Delhi, the Institute of Company Secretaries of India, Supreme Court Bar Association, CSTAT Bar Association, and All India Management Association. Alongside HNS partners, we are glad to be joined by another esteemed law firm from Indonesia contributing to today's discussion, namely HHR lawyers. I would now request Ms. Milanti T. Kirana to please introduce HHR lawyers and its distinguished speakers. Over to you, Ms. Kirana.
Okay, hi. everyone. We are from Huta Barat Halim and Rekan, known as HHR lawyers or HHR. So HHR was established in 1996 by our two founding partners, Mr. Peo Huta Barat and Ms. Nini Halim. We provide a full range of legal services with approximately 11 practice areas in total, and we are a member of Meritas, the Alliance of Independent Law Firms. I myself, I'm one of the speakers. I'm Milanti Kirana. You can call me Mila. I'm one of the partners of HHR. I've been practicing for about 18 years, and my main practice areas are corporate investment and M&A, maritime, logistic and port, personal data protection. I'll be presenting the topic on reshoring and supply chain diversification, role of Indonesia in global investment strategies. Also joining us, one of our partners, Mr. Fathan Nautika, practicing mainly in the areas of commercial dispute, corporate investment and M&A, and banking finance. He'll be presenting the topic on impacts of global tariffs and retentions of FDI. And then we also have here Rani, Miss Rani Nur Aini, our senior associate. She is attached to HHR's practice group of corporate investment and M&A, and then capital market, banking, and finance. She'll be presenting the decentralization and regional investment, structuring investment beyond Java. And lastly, also our associate, she is mainly practicing in corporate investment and M&A. Her name is Aziza, Aziza Katili. She'll be presenting the recent legal reforms in Indonesia, including the OSS system, downstreaming policies, and carbon capture regulations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Mila. That was quite insightful and must have helped our viewers and participants to gain insights into the firm's functioning and dynamics. So, before we move into the core discussion, let me briefly set out the context for today's theme, which focuses on navigating FDI and cross border structuring amid the trade tensions and supply chain realignment. So today's discussion will revolve around four broad themes. To begin with, we'll be discussing the impact of global tariffs and trade tensions on foreign direct investment structuring. Secondly, the global shift towards reshoring and supply chain diversification. Thirdly, we'll be discussing regulatory reforms and investment incentives shaping investors' confidence. And lastly, the growing importance of decentralized and regional investment hubs, particularly in Indonesia. In short, this session is designed to examine how evolving global trade dynamics, particularly tariff regimes, geopolitical realignments, and supply chain restructuring, are shaping foreign direct investment strategies in India and Indonesia. So, now let's begin the session. In India, higher tariffs on export oriented sectors such as textiles, gems, and jewelry and manufacturing, combined with structural challenges, have led investors to reassess traditional export led models and focus more on diversification and risk mitigation strategies. Similarly, in Indonesia, elevated tariffs have impacted labor intensive manufacturing sectors, promoting investors to rethink manufacturing footprints, price structures, and long term supply commitments, while also accelerating regulatory reforms aimed at improving investments. With this background, I would now like to invite Mr. Kotni to share his perspective in light of the heightened US tariff regimes and declining export led foreign direct investment models. How should India recalibrate its FDI structuring strategy to reduce tariff exposure while preserving the competitiveness for global manufacturing investors? Over to you, Mr. Kotni.
Thank you, Sidharth, and greetings from India. Namaste. So, thank you for inviting me to an interesting discussion on cross-border structuring of global trade from India perspective, especially to decide and devise on supply chain, etc. We all know how the US tariff wars against different countries, including India, China, etc., is impacting the world. So, therefore, we are living in a world which is uncertain. Every morning we come and realize that there's something new which is hitting some part of the world from tariff and trade perspective. So definitely India is not left alone. So it is also in the same boat as the other countries in the world, right? So India, the focus, at least for the last 14, 15 years, has been on the manufacturing-led growth, even for export growth, right? Whereas India is known to be an IT powerhouse, a digital powerhouse, which has given world many an invention in the information technology field. So therefore, it is not surprising that India is a little uncomfortable with the tariff exposure, especially in certain sectors like textile, jewelry, etc., where India has got a comparative advantage. So therefore, my take on it is very clear that yes, manufacturing is extremely important for the world over, for India also. US is not the only market. The world is comprising so many other countries. So therefore, we need to look at the blocks. We need to look at the free trade agreements with various countries which we've entered into in the past. What is the possibility of entering into new agreements in the future? That apart, we also need to look at our own regulatory background in the country, because we are known to be a very highly regulated country with a lot of difficulty in doing business. So therefore, it should not be just mere lip service, but it has to be something more than lip service. Also, we need to look at our infrastructure, especially in the areas of logistics. When I'm talking about logistics, it is things like free trade warehousing zones, special economic zones, and other schemes of the government on making India a hub for international logistics. So therefore, if we look at from all the perspectives, and if the planning is proper, I think we can get over the tariff uncertainty syndrome, which is led by the US these days in the world. So we definitely need to align manufacturing, but then we need to ensure that our digital strength is kept in mind, and we should work with countries like Indonesia and other countries which are similarly placed and which have similar ideologies, similar kind of culture, background, etc., etc. I think everything is not lost. We are just reacting to one particular person. I'm not going to name that person and what that person is going to do in the next morning in terms of policy, because international policy is not decided on knee-jerk reactions. It is decided on strong macro and microeconomic principles. International economies have to work, coexist, and help each other hand in hand to make sure that the world is more of a peaceful place to live. And then there is collaboration, globalization, and there is better interaction between countries in the world. This is my opening take.
That was quite insightful, Mr. Kotni, and we are glad you shared the same. These insights were very significant. So, moving forward, I would now ask Mr. Nautika to share his views on whether recent developments in global tariffs and trade tensions influence foreign investors' decision to relocate or restructure investments into or out of Indonesia, particularly to tariff-sensitive sectors. Over to you, Mr. Nautika. You're not audible, Mr. Nautika.
Okay, thank you, Sidharth, for your time. So I'll give you the context about the current condition of uh, Indonesia after the tariff imposed by US, as already mentioned by Mr. Kotni, that this is not the end of the world. I mean, we have to find another how on we mitigate the issue. So give you the condition in Indonesia. Indonesia plays substantial role in global supply chains, especially in commodities, manufacturing, and natural resource. We have large domestic market, resource and downstream policy that is very attractive for the investment. Indonesia also known as an alternative manufacturing and processing base amid China plus one. So we all usually look as the another alternative other than China in Southeast Asian market. Okay, so after the 19% tariff imposed by US. Previously, we have 8% in 2024, and then in April, the US imposed the 32%, and then we negotiate to 19%. Even though we have already reduced the tariff, we still have impacted the business, so, especially for commodities and textile and something like that, and electronics. But we have zero exemption for palm oil, tea, coffee, and etc. So let's take a look at the textile and apparel. We are one of the largest exporters to US, and the 19 is hampering our business, and all of the businessmen will take a look at another market, let's say Europe and also another ASEAN Pacific countries. But then again, we seek looking for a better opportunity for nickel and EV battery, and also palm oil and natural resources. We understand that China imposed a greater tariff, so Indonesia will be looked as uh, another alternative if the investment from China is too high. But then again, the electronics and manufacturing is imposed a high tariff, and it will, as you know, that this is retail market, and slight margin can be very devastated for the investment. This is just for our reference that the condition now. So the electrical and machinery, as we mentioned, is very sensitive and it's very impacted by the tariff. So for Indonesia, we have a positive and also opportunity, increased interest in Indonesia as an alternative, as we mentioned, for manufacturing and processing base. And also accelerating the FDI in downstream and value-added sectors rather than the cost-driven sectors. And also the negative impact or the cautionary that we have to take a look is higher compliance and documentation costs, because as we understand that US will implement a more constraint and scrutiny the documentation, so we have to there's no inevitable that the cost for the compliance will be higher. And then risk of policy overreaction domestically in Indonesia. Sometimes we are more like not just to mitigate, but mostly reactive policy. And we have to be very careful because the policy inconsistency are decisive for this issue. So I think that's the opening for the issue. Maybe we can talk more during the Q&A session. Thank you, Sidharth.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nautika, for providing us with your insights. So, moving forward, in context of reshoring and supply chain diversification, both India and Indonesia are increasingly being positioned as key components of the China Plus One strategy. India's skilled workforce, production linked incentives, and improving logistics infrastructure are strengthening its appeal for manufacturing and high value services. At the same time, Indonesia's downstreaming policies and regulatory facilitation measures have positioned it as a critical hub for value added manufacturing, providing particularly in minerals, EV batteries, and clean energy supply chains. I would now like to invite Ms. Palla to share her insights on how effective has the China's plus one strategy been in translating geopolitical realignments into sustainable FDI inflows for India in sectors such as electronics and automotive manufacturing, amongst the others. Over to you, Ms. Palla.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and namaste from India. And so let's dive into the China Plus One strategy and how it is reshaping global manufacturing amidst geopolitical shifts. Now, we have seen during the COVID times and even the post-COVID, it has been a tremendous lesson for many countries that depending on a single country for most of its imports, it can definitely create a lot of constraint and difficulties, especially in during COVID times. We have seen how the global supply chain has got affected, and it even impacted many countries that way. So depending solely on one country, it's definitely not suggestible. There's always a country should adopt multi-node approach, so that they can minimize regional fluctuations or regional conflicts and all that. Now coming to India, I mean, it has attracted significant FDI, okay, especially in electronics. And if you take an Apple suppliers like Foxconn and Wistron are ramping up assembly here and alongside Samsung. And we also see that automotive sector is also booming in India today. So as firms diversify away from China, and also government product linked initiative schemes, have accelerated and making India a key hub now. Now, if you take Union Cabinet, our Indian government has come up with many product linked initiative schemes, especially in terms, in electronics and automotive sectors. Like if you take in the year 2021, in the budget 2021, Union Cabinet has laid down a budget of a proposal of almost like 25,938 crores. That is roughly 287.58 USD million. For a period of 5 years, that is from 22-23 financial year to 26-27 financial year. So this would boost the manufacturing in especially manufacturing of advanced automotive technology. And also it will facilitate and promote deep localization of advanced automotive technology and enable the creation of domestic as well as global supply chains. And coming down to product link schemes for large-scale electronic manufacturing. Again, the government has come up with many schemes here, many initiatives attracting large investments in mobile phone manufacturing and also specified electronic components, including assembly, testing, marking, and packaging units. So the scheme also provides an initiative of 4% to 6% on incremental sales, and especially for goods manufactured in India and covered under target segments to eligible companies. So there are various initiatives the Indian government has taken. And at the same time, if you see this India, Middle East, Europe corridor, that is also placing India in a very prominent position. And also we have the PM Gati Shakti National Master Plan, which is also slashing India's trade costs, cutting transit times, and boosting logistics efficiency. Like if you take IMEC, that is India, Middle East, Europe corridor, it targets a game-changing 30% reduction in logistic costs and 40% reduction in transport time through seamless rail and port networking linking India and Middle East and European Union, and meanwhile, Gati Shakti synchronizes our domestic infrastructure, especially roads, railways, and ports and airways, bringing costs in line with global benchmarks. So that way, this helps counter China's belt and also places India and from a low margin assembly to high valued production. Now, but there are also challenges in Indian economy, and especially compared with China's massive investment, India still lacks in infrastructure, especially in ports, power logistics, which Mr. Srinivas Kotni has already mentioned. So these are things India needs to take care and really need to work on these segments. And while improving, India also need to work on bureaucratic hurdles, land acquisition issues still persist in India. So we need to look into that and slowly, so that help in setting up large scale factories in a less time. Today it takes for us roughly some 2 to 3 years to set up a large factory setup, maybe cutting down, because we have competitors today, Mexico and Vietnam, and there, it just takes in Vietnam for a factory or a manufacturing unit to be set up. I think it just takes some 3 to 4 months time. I think that duration is very, very significant when it comes to attracting foreign investors and foreign direct investment in India. So in essence, yeah, India is successfully leveraging the geopolitical realignment for China plus one strategy, but the journey to becoming a diversified global manufacturing powerhouse will require overcoming significant structural and implemental challenges.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights, Ms.
Right.
Palla. This is such a significant issue which you have addressed. Uh, Moving forward, I would want to ask Ms. Kirana to share her perspective on how does legal certainty, trade, customs, and local content influence investors, reshoring, and supply chain diversification decisions in Indonesia. Over to you, Ms. Kirana.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna present the how do legal certainty, trade regulations, customs, and local content requirements influence investors in relation to the reshoring and supply chain diversification. So basically, reshoring and supply chain diversification decisions are shaped by legal certainty across investment licensing, trade regulation, customs compliance, and local content requirements. These regulations do not prohibit investment, but they materially determine how supply chains must be structured to be legally viable and commercially sustainable. So at least there are 4 aspects that really influence the decisions for investors in reshoring and also the supply chain diversification in Asia. First of all is the legal certainty as a threshold consideration. Sorry. So from an investor's perspective, the legal certainty shall also mean the clarity of applicable rules, predictability of regulatory outcomes, and enforceability of rights and obligations. So as you can see here, because investment in Indonesia, meaning a long-term capital commitment, for example, for manufacturing facilities, supply contracts, workforce and compliance system, these commitments are only viable where the licensing requirements are identifiable in advance. Regulatory authority is clearly allocated between central and regional governments, and changes in the regulatory requirements are manageable within a structured compliance framework. So Indonesia keep on evolving and also adjusting to the development of business in all over the world. Like in 2025, we have basically consolidated law number 6 in 2023, reinforces the government's policy toward regulatory simplification and centralized licensing. So in 2025, for the implementation, we also issued the GR 28/2025, which governs the current OSS-based risk-based licensing regime. And also the second aspect is the trade regulation as structuring constraint. Why is it? Because for supply chain structuring, trade regulations influence reshoring decisions because it determines who may act as importer, which goods are subject to licensing, technical approvals or restrictions, documentation and compliance obligations attached to specific product categories. For example, we also have the updated import policy in Ministry of Trade Regulation in 2025. It is clearly the regulation divided who may act as the importer and which company can obtain certain import license and so on. So it is very essential to really have a regulatory framework ready in advance, because this often requires the investor to separate manufacturing activities from import and distribution functions, because in Indonesia, there are distinctions between the two. So investors may also require to allocate import responsibilities to entities that meet the regulatory criteria, and then design the contractual and logistical arrangements consistent with the import policy. Again, in 2025, we also updated everything. And the third is the I think this is quite similar in country worldwide. Customs regulations as a determinant of cost, timing, and compliance exposure. Because custom law affects reshoring decision at least in three significant ways: in import duty, tax liability, timing and continuity of supply, compliance, and audit exposures. Because in relation timing, let's say clearance procedures, inspection, and post-clearance audit regimes influence delivery timelines, right? So for manufacturing operations, customs may delays translate directly into production risk. So we have to really factor in these aspects as well. And then the fourth aspect is the local content. We call it TKDN or BMP in Indonesia. Because why is it influence the reshoring and also supply chain? Because local content requirements operate as the market access conditions in certain sectors. Products that do not meet minimum TKDN threshold may not be eligible for sale or deployment. For example, to be specific, like electronic or handphone, smartphone. So there are certain regulations in relation to the TKDN, the local content, so that the product may be distributed in Indonesia. The second, because TKDN also operates as the procurement eligibility criteria. So like for example, government and SOE procurement frameworks often require TKDN compliance as a mandatory or weighted criterion. For example, if you want to participate in a procurement of government's goods and services, then the government will require certain TKDN threshold for this procurement. So without that, you cannot participate in the procurement of the government's goods and services. And then the third is the regulatory preconditions in regulated sectors. So in some industries, TKDN certification is required before the technical approval or registrations are issued. So accordingly, supply chains must be designed to ensure that sufficient domestic value is generated to meet the applicable TKDN or BNP requirements where the target market or project so requires. So I think that's all for the first opening. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Ms. Kirana. So moving forward, in India, liberalized FDI caps, PLI schemes, reduce corporate tax rates, and digitalize approval systems are making cross-border structuring more predictable and investor-friendly. On the other hand, in Indonesia, regulatory harmonization through the OSS system, lower capital thresholds, the positive investment list, particularly PDI, and incentives for downstream and green investments have enhanced transparency and ease of entry. With this regulatory backdrop, I would like to invite Ms. Kataruka, and I have a question for her in particular. So, Ms. Kataruka, to what degree do production-linked incentive schemes materially alter investor risk calculus, and how should foreign investors legally structure operations to maximize PLI benefits while ensuring regulatory compliance? Over to you, Ms. Kataruka.
Thank you, Sidharth, and a very warm good evening to everyone. With regard to the question that Sidharth has posed, which pertains to the production-linked incentive scheme and how the foreign investor should legally structure their operation to maximize this production-linked incentive scheme while ensuring regulatory compliance. So, as Ms. Palla had already mentioned, that it is the PLI, the Production Linked Incentive Scheme. It is an Indian government initiative which has been launched in the year around 2020 to promote domestic manufacturing by providing financial incentives to all the eligible companies based on incremental sales. And the scheme initially targeted around 3 sectors. However, it has expanded over time to around 14 sectors, ranging from electronics and textiles to automobiles and food processing. PLI scheme materially improves the project economics by directly linking the incentives to the production output, and it therefore reduces the early stage revenue risk. This has been particularly effective in capital intensive sectors such as electronics, semiconductors, automotive components, and pharmaceuticals, so to say. And moreover, sophisticated investors do not treat PLI as the foundation of their investment thesis. Instead, it is, so to say, viewed as an upside enhancer and not a risk eliminator. The presence of eligibility thresholds, annual performance benchmarks, potential clawback provision means that compliance discipline is critical. And from a legal structuring perspective, best practices that includes a setting up of dedicated PLI eligible manufacturing entities. I'll also deal with what is generally like a selection of entities one should get into. Secondly, conservative output forecasting, segregating the IP ownership from manufacturing operations to avoid incentive disqualification. And investors are also building the contractual flexibility into supply and offtake arrangements to manage the production volatility. In order to maximize benefits while ensuring compliance with the FEMA and Companies Act, investors should follow a structural blueprint, such as by the entity selection is very crucial here. So to say that although 100% foreign-owned entities do qualify, but it has to be registered as an Indian company. And these benefits also help reduce costs and boost global competitiveness. And one should avoid limited liability partnerships or foreign branches, which are generally ineligible for PLI benefits. 100% subsidiary allows the foreign parent to maintain IPs, which also satisfy the domestic manufacturer requirement. Secondly, it is always preferred that one should get into or prioritize the greenfield investment versus the brownfield investment, because that way, if there is a completely new entity, so that is generally preferred and it is a safer investment rather than a brownfield investment. And it also leads to disputes during the government audits of incremental sales, etc. One should also be very thorough with the legal and accounting structure, so to keep it audit ready. That is pretty much required. And the government's project management agency requires a clear trail from purchase of raw materials to the final GST invoice. So all that should be taken care of. And one must definitely ensure that the capital infusion follows the FDI policy 2020 that has been amended recently, and investments from countries sharing a land border with India, example, let's say China, they require prior government approval, which can delay PLI timeline somehow. So in short, PLI alters the risk positively, but when it is combined with a disciplined structuring and operational realism, so to say. So that's from my end for this segment. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, ma'am. Moving forward, my next question will be to Miss Aziza Katili. Ms. Katili, if you could provide your perspective with respect to what are the recent regulatory reforms at the market entry stage in Indonesia. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sidharth. Okay, so when we talk about regulatory reforms, there are certain aspects that we need to consider. The first is the key question for cross-border investors today is no longer simply whether investment is permitted, but how regulation shapes the investment journey from entry to operation and over the life of the project. So at the market entry stage, Indonesia's recent regulatory reforms can be understood as a shift from discretionary access to a rules-based and more predictable investment framework. From a legal perspective, this is reflected mainly in how entry is administered, how business activities are classified, and how sectoral access is determined. First, from a licensing perspective, Indonesia has shifted from previously an approval-based licensing to a risk-based framework administered through the online single submission or the OSS system. The OSS system was first initiated under Government Regulation number 24 of 2018 and then refined under the OSS system of 2025 under Government Regulation number 28, which aims to strengthen clarity in licensing procedures and the allocation of authority among government bodies. Under this current OSS risk-based approach system, the applicable business classification or KBLI determines the risk level and in turn the license and standards required. Second, business classification plays a central legal role. The introduction of KBLI 2025, replacing the previous KBLI 2020, is therefore not merely administrative. It refines existing business activities and introduces new classifications, meaning that the legal pathway for entry may change depending on how an activity is categorized. For investors, this makes early regulatory mapping at the entry stage particularly important. And then the third one, entry is also shaped by sectoral eligibility rules under the Positive Investment List or PIL, as regulated under the Presidential Regulation number 10 of 2021 as amended. Indonesia has moved away from a negative list approach and now classifies business fields into closed sectors, priority sectors, sectors that are allowed or allocated for partnership with cooperative and MSMEs, sectors with certain requirements, and sectors that are not included in the aforementioned categories. Legally, this regime determines whether foreign investment is permitted, under what ownership structure, and with what conditions. And then the fourth one, from a corporate law standpoint, the reduction of minimum paid-up capital for foreign investment companies has lowered the formal entry barrier to 2.5 billion rupiah from previously 10 billion rupiah. In this context of incentive, both fiscal and non-fiscal remain conditional and sector-driven, reinforcing the importance of aligning entry planning with the applicable regulatory framework. Our regulations include fiscal incentive through tax allowance, tax holiday, investment allowance, and customs and excise incentive. Non-fiscal incentives, on the other hand, provide ease of business licensing, provide provision of supporting infrastructure, guaranteed availability of energy, guaranteed availability of raw materials, immigration, manpower, and other convenience. These incentives, however, are conditional depending on the business activities that the business actor choose. Overall, these reforms do not simply make entry faster, they make it more predictable and classifiable, allowing foreign investors to assess upfront how their business activities will be treated under Indonesian laws. And then moving on, once an investor has entered the market through the OSS framework and structured its investment accordingly, regulatory focus shifts beyond entry requirements and moves toward the substance and depth of the investment itself. This is where downstreaming policies and carbon capture regulations become relevant. Under our President Prabowo Subianto's Astacita agenda, particularly priority number 5, the government emphasized the continuation of downstreaming and the development of resource-based industries to strengthen domestic value added. Downstreaming is clearly reflected in the Indonesia's national long-term and also the medium-term development plan, which prioritize value-added industrialization. While the regulations themselves do not impose direct obligations on investors, it functions as a normative reference that informs the design and interpretation of sectoral regulations. Under our development plans, the government has identified priority downstreaming sectors, including nickel, copper, palm oil, and other relevant commodities. This policy direction becomes legally consequential through sector-specific legislation, most notably the 2025 amendments to our mining law. Under the amended framework, downstreaming considerations are taken into account in the granting and prioritization of mining business areas, particularly for metal minerals, applicable to both state-owned enterprises and also private sectors, including foreign investors. This measure aims to strengthen domestic supply chains, increase local employment, and also attract investment. This reform provides greater regulatory clarity and a clearer legal basis for prioritizing downstream-oriented investment proposals in the allocation of new mining license areas. As a result, investment proposals are assessed not only on capital and technical capability, but also on their contribution to domestic processing, refining, and supply chain regulations. Nickel smelting is one of the clearest illustration of how downstreaming reforms influence foreign investment direction. Smelters are typically capital intensive and long-term, and they sit at the intersection of mining and industrial manufacturing. From a legal standpoint, the key point is not that investors are compelled to build smelters, but rather that the regulatory ecosystem increasingly favors investment models that embed processing and industrial depth, as opposed to standalone upstream extraction. And in this sense, downstreaming reforms shape the substance of the investment, what the investment is designed to do within Indonesia's economy. In practice, this is often supported by investment incentive, both fiscal and non-fiscal, depending on sector classification and project profile. Without going into the tax details, the key takeaway is that incentives operate as a complementary tool to reinforce deeper value-added investments rather than short-term models. And then once downstreaming projects such as smelters move into full operation, the regulatory focus naturally expands to how industrial activities are managed over time. Industrial processing activities are energy intensive and may generate significant emissions, which bring us to a second set of reforms in the Indonesia's carbon capture framework. The most important development here is that carbon capture and storage is no longer treated merely as a sustainability narrative. Indonesia has now introduced a clearer legal basis and licensing architecture for carbon capture storage, or CCS, and also carbon capture utilization and storage, or CCUS, which makes carbon management not just a commitment, but actually a regulated investment activity. So at the umbrella level, Presidential Regulation number 14 of 2024 provides cross-sector recognition for the implementation of carbon capture and storage activities. This is legally significant because it anchors CCS within Indonesia's regulatory system as a legitimate activity rather than a voluntary corporate initiative. This framework is then operationalized through the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources Regulation, which governs the implementation of carbon storage activities under designated carbon storage license areas. In other words, the regulation introduced a clear licensing pathway and institutional governance for storage projects, which is essential for investment certainty. And importantly, this framework enables us to very clearly see that practical legal structuring point is that the separation between the industrial emitter and the storage operator. Carbon storage is regulated as a distinct activity, meaning investors do not necessarily need to embed CCS within their core industrial license. Instead, CCS might be structured through a dedicated subsidiary, a joint venture with specialized partners, or a third-party operator arrangement. This is what makes CCS bankable from a legal perspective, because the roles, the approval, and license activities can be separated and allocated. And in parallel, for the oil and gas sector, Our Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources also issued a regulation number 2 of 2023, which remains relevant because it regulates CCS and CCUS implementation within the upstream oil and gas activities. This becomes especially important where CCS is developed using subsurface expertise and governance mechanisms that are already familiar in the upstream operations. And then in the financial layer, our Financial Services Authority, or the OJK, issued the OJK regulation number 14 of 2023 on the carbon trading through carbon exchanges. So this regulation established the framework for carbon trading through the carbon exchange. While this is not a CCS regulation per se, but it supports the investment ecosystem by opening pathways for carbon-related projects to be linked to carbon market mechanisms, which may increase project attractiveness and support long-term commercial viability. And then, taken together, these reforms do more than simplify compliance. They reshape how foreign investment should be structured and which sectors become practically attractive. First, in terms of FDI structuring, the OSS risk-based system, KBLI classification, and sectoral eligibility rules mean that investor can no longer enter using a one-size-fits-all structure. Structuring becomes increasingly license-driven and activity-driven, requiring early mapping of business activities, foreign ownership limitation, and risk-based licensing requirements. In practice, this often leads to segmented structures, such as joint ventures where ownership caps apply, or maybe holding company, operating company model, and also separate entities for regulated business lines. And second, in terms of sectoral opportunities, the investment landscape is increasingly aligned with Indonesia's direction toward deeper, value-added, and long-term projects, particularly downstream processing and emerging sustainability-linked activities such as carbon capture, as I previously discussed. So overall, Indonesia's recent reforms have not only made entry more predictable, they have also made the investment environment more structured, where the key question for investors is no longer simply can we enter, but how do we structure the investment to operate legally and sustainably over the long term? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Katili, for providing us with such a thoughtful perspective. Your insights will be of great use to our viewers, I believe. Now, recently, Indonesia has shifted towards decentralized investment with FDI increasingly moving beyond Java into resource-rich regions such as Central Sulawesi and North Maluku. At the same time, investing in these regions requires careful assessment of infrastructure readiness, local governance, land acquisition, labor availability, and regulatory variation across provinces. While regional hubs offer strong strategic and cost advantages, they demand a more location-specific and legally nuanced investment approach. With this backdrop, I would now like to invite Mr. Kotni to share his insights on how do large-scale infrastructure initiatives such as PM Gati Shakti and the India Middle East Europe Economic Corridor reshape India's attractiveness as a global supply chain hub from a cross-border structuring perspective. Over to you, Mr. Kotni.
Thank you, Sidharth. Uh, I've heard in detail the Indonesian side of the regulatory perspective and the initiatives being taken, and I'm pretty impressed by the carbon-centric approach which Indonesia is taking. But similar structures are there in India also. But coming back to the specific question which you have put to me with regard to the schemes the government has introduced for infrastructure development in the logistics sector, namely the PM Gati Shakti and the India Middle East Europe Economic Corridor, which Thanuja also touched upon in her submissions a little while back. I'm sure these enhance the attractiveness of India as a global chain supply hub. Why you may ask the question why it does so. Because it increases the logistics efficiency of the country. Also, it is the connectivity is established by different modes: rail, road, undersea, coastal, etc., whichever way to reduce the distance, reduce the cost, reduce the freight cost, etc. The connectivity is enhanced, like I just mentioned, and there is also cross-border integration. So therefore, there is a movement of goods from continents and from countries, even though the distances are unbelievably long as compared to the yesteryears. So therefore, these kinds of industrial corridors, logistic corridors, economic corridors make the world close, very close. Uh, if you talk about PM Gati Shakti, it enables integrated planning, which is not only dealing with transport, it is connecting all the ports, the industrial corridors. It reduces transit time and logistics costs, which it is a natural consequence of this. The key factor for investors structuring regional manufacturing and distribution hubs is this kind of initiatives. So therefore, the companies or the investors who are looking at India should keep in mind these kinds of initiatives of the government. Of course, I'm not saying that earlier we didn't have, we had a lot of schemes. We had the Special Economic Zone Act, which came in 2005. We had the Free Trade Warehousing Zone scheme, which came in as a part of Special Economic Zones. Then we had the Authorized Economic Operators scheme, which has introduced the customs to give fillip to compliant players, giving them green channel facilities, faster customs clearance, etc. So therefore, from a cross-border structuring perspective, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, which is also called IMEC, which positions India as a strategic link between Asia, the Middle East, and the Europe. So you can imagine how the connectivity is taking Asia right at the doorsteps of European countries. It allows multinational companies to design multi-country manufacturing warehouses and also establish distribution models by putting in hub and spoke models with India as a central node. Right. So therefore, I also forgot to mention about another scheme under the customs, the MOVER scheme, that is the manufacturing and warehousing operations within a bonded warehouse. So therefore, in a warehouse, you can manufacture. So therefore, the customs has come up with these kinds of liberalizations, and a lot of notifications and circulars have come about it to enable manufacturing operations therein. Also, the very interesting part of Indian logistics industry is in the free trade warehousing zones. One can bring in goods from anywhere in the world, and you can store for any long period of time without paying a single penny of customs duty, unless until the goods are moved into the domestic tariff area. So therefore, these free trade warehousing zones can be used as hub and spoke models. Many pharma companies in the world, they're using it. Many automobile companies are using it. A lot of alcohol brands are using it, so that the goods are there, but meant for across the world, but is being stored in India. So therefore, even this e-commerce business, there's a lot of circulars which have come in, wherein it allows clearance of e-commerce parcels at straight 40% customs rate, as against baggage and other rates which are near about 80 to 100%. So therefore, there is a lot of liberalization in international e-commerce operations also. So the large multinational brands which want to come into Indian market, but which don't have the wherewithal to establish brick and mortar shops, can use these schemes and then reach their products right across to India, even to grade 2, grade 3 cities. So together, I think these initiatives, the existing ones and also the ones PM Gati Shakti and IMEC, these initiatives support more resilient, diversified, and very tariff efficient supply chains, because tariff becomes efficient, freight becomes efficient, time becomes efficient, which strengthens India's role in global manufacturing networks. So therefore, as far as global manufacturing is concerned, India is at the threshold, and I'm sure if one looks at the Indian policy and regulatory angle, India is a very attractive destination for logistics, just to keep the goods, warehouse the goods, and also use it as a hub and spoke model. Thank you so much, Siddharth. This is what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kotni. These insights were very helpful and very imperative for our audience here. So, moving forward, I would now request Ms. Rani to share her views on whether the government of Indonesia currently prioritizing the investment development of several sectors, but the growth apparently isn't happening only in Java anymore. So, how do you view the development outside Java, Ms. Rani? Over to you.
Thank you. So yes, it's definitely growing. Let me share you the screen. So if you can see here, this is actually the data for investment for Indonesia for the past years. However, it's been quite consistent for the past 5 years. More than 50% of Indonesian investment has taken place outside of Java. So shows that the narrative has changed. Java is no longer the sole market and outer islands are no longer the resource suppliers. And similar like India before, many incentives since India, I think there's a couple of reasons for this growth as well in Indonesia. First, logistic efficiency, second, regulatory and sectoral pools, and third is special treatment for special locations. For logistics, infrastructure outside of Java nowadays is way better comparing to 10 years ago. Now delivering ports in Sulawesi, integrated toll road in Sumatra, basically logistic costs outside of Java no longer kills profits for investors. And that's why some of this growth actually happened because many businesses were in Java, but they moved out of Java for efficiency because lower wages standard, other operational advantages, and so on. So, and yeah, similar to India, we have many initiatives before. Like Aziza already mentioned, we divide our business into several sectors, including priority business. And why this is a push? Well, this sector dominated by natural resources like mining, agricultures, and mostly they're sit outside of Java. Another one, so yeah, like Aziz already mentioned as well, the downstreaming sectors. Indonesia's government really pushing this sector nowadays, and most of them actually located outside of Java. So if you can see this map, Indonesian government already mapped downstream sectors by sectors and geography. Like example, palm oil sector is anchored in Sumatra and Kalimantan, nickel and gas in Sulawesi and Papua. And I think this strategy so far is working because this sector has already contributed 30% of the total investment of all sectors in Indonesia. And it's actually a jump over 60% since last year. And the third, I think the major driver is the special locations like special economic zones, free trade zones. So why outside of Java impacted because of this? Yes, most of these sectors are located outside of Java. For FTZ, we have only 4 and all of them are located outside of Java. For SEZ, we have 25 and 18 of them are located outside of Java. And once you actually set up a business in SEZ sector or location, you sort of getting into VIP lane. You can get lots of incentives. Like I think like India, before income tax reduction up to 100%, exemption of import duties. Even you can get simpler licensing process where you can actually skip several stages to get the license. So this is actually pretty good. And I feel like Indonesian SEG location is still quite small, but this is actually shows our area, by the way, is only 1% of comparing to our neighbor, Malaysia. Malaysian SEZ location is actually 100% larger than us. But I think shows that Indonesia is still, growing. We have lots of potential for growth. So overall, yes, I think like the opportunity is very large. We have lots of intensive and even getting stronger these days, potentially bigger markets. However, I think investors really have to be careful because the execution risk is also expanding. Sometimes you can think institutional readiness is exactly the same in each regions because we have lots of regions in Indonesia. It could be different. Licensing integrations quite uneven sometimes, and operational frictions could even be higher than what you see in Java. So I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rani. Uh, the insights were quite imperative and quite helpful. Moving on, I would request Ms. Thanuja Palla to share her views on how should foreign investors approach India-centric supply chain. structuring to ensure resilience against future tariff escalations while remaining compliant with India's domestic sourcing and localization policies. Over to you, Ms. Palla.
Yeah, thank you, Sidharth. Much of it is actually covered by Mr. Srinivas Kotni. But more, I mean, just to add a few more points from my side. So India definitely remains a massive market. I mean, an attractive market because we have 1.4 billion, over 1.4 billion population. And definitely, it's an attractive destination for foreign investors to establish business and manufacturing units. And however, they must be mindful of certain the key strategies when it comes to investing in India and taking advantage of the Indian initiatives, Indian government initiatives and the schemes. So, but if you take building in the context of building India-centric supply chain, it involves leveraging the country's growing foreign direct investment, which reached almost like $81 billion in financial year 2025. That is huge. And I mean, by focusing on local integration, diversification, and strategic use of government initiatives like product-linked, incentive schemes and free trade agreements. And this has to enhance compliance, and it also helped in managing tariffs, right? So what are the four strategies that I can put across here? Basically, it is strategic localization and backward integration, so align business plans, it is especially the foreign investors should align their business plans with government PLI schemes, and which are almost they have been initiated in almost like 14 sectors in India today: electronics, pharmaceuticals, automotives, semiconductors, many sectors, and to gain financial advantages and also to reduce investment risk. So these incentives support domestic manufacturing capabilities and also self-reliance goals for foreign investors. At the same time, invest in domestic sourcing and vendor development, which is very crucial here. Like I said, backward integration. Identify and qualify local suppliers to reduce on, imported components, so that one can cut down on costs and thereby mitigating potential tariff impacts and complying with Make in India initiatives. So this includes, again, backward integration and collaborative production with local vendors. And also utilize special economic zones like Mr. Srinivas Kotni has already mentioned. Utilize special economic zones and foreign trade zones, so that you can cut down on costs and also utilize the various opportunities Indian government has provided and tax incentives as well. And coming down to supply chain diversification and flexibility. So I would again adopt China plus one strategy here, not just only one country, go for multi-node approach and also implement dual sourcing. So for critical materials and components, develop alternative sources of supply. Like, today we are coming up with this IMEC, which was rightly quoted by one of our speakers here. So that is again an important aspect where you connect India, Asia, and then the Middle East, and also the, European Union corridor. So that would, when we go for this multi-node approach, this would ensure continuity during disruptions or sudden tariff changes, and also nearshoring and reshoring consideration. So evaluate cost benefits of moving production facilities closer to Indian market, so to consolidate control or reduce lead times and lower risk associated with long global supply chains. And also master trade and regulations, be mindful of free trade agreements with UAE and Australia, which Indian government has recently entered, and also the UK, and watch for European Union or US deals, especially for tariff cuts. And also work with customer experts and also legal experts to reduce duty obligations. So, and also go digital. So these are the four strategies maybe, the investors should be mindful of, foreign investors, and to take the best advantage of Indian initiatives to be a global hub. Right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Palla. So my next question would be for Mr. Nautika. Mr. Nautika, I wanted to know if Indonesia's current investment and trade regulatory framework provides sufficient certainty and protection for foreign investors seeking to mitigate risks arising from global tariffs, ongoing trade tensions, and future geopolitical changes. Over to you, Mr. Nautika.
Okay, thank you, Sidharth, for the question. So, maybe some investor who export to the US after the imposition of tariff might consider shifting their production or investment also from Indonesia, and they think that there's a lot of uncertainty here. But as Aziza and Rani already tell to us, that there's a lot of incentives and a lot of facility and shifting from not only in Java but also across the country, that the government also give the investors to safeguard their investment by giving the facilities and also all of the incentive they can give. And also we have the domestic value addition, that we increase the number of domestic component level to reduce the process cost, and so make the goods more competitive in US market. So moreover that the Indonesia also give the changing policy from shifting from cost driven to value driven export, so the price elastically is reduced and tariff are less determinative due to the tariff. And also we can utilize the tax incentive, and for the manufacturing company, there's a lot of important exemption, bonded zone facilities, and a lot of incentive provided by the government. Uh, we also imposed a new regulation, like already stated by our college, that the job creation law, it's cut off a lot of administrative issue, and it's reduced all of the bureaucracy and give the leniency to obtain certain licenses. And also we have the OSS, the online single submission. I mean, we all know how to proceed with the licensing in Indonesia before we submit it. Previously, we don't know what kind of license will be imposed in the future, but due to online single submission, we already know in the front end what kind of license that we have to get. And also, the Indonesia also have the commitment with another ASEAN country. I mean, ASEAN country. I mean, we have strengthened our neighboring countries, so we will be strong together. However, there's still a lot of issues in Indonesia because this kind of i- new tariff enforcement by US is uh, surprising all of the government, but there's and then they give like a reactive policy, but then again the position is quite strong, and also our government act quickly to reduce the tariff from previously 32% to 19. It means that the government is not silent about this, and they keep the best effort to protect and safeguard the foreign investment in Indonesia. Thank you, Sidharth.
Thank you so much for your insights, Mr. Nautika. My next question would be to Ms. Rani. Ms. Rani, we understand that there are cases where a project was fully licensed at the national level but later stalled at the local enforcement stage. Where do you typically see the biggest points of friction between central approval and regional implementation? Over to
Thank
you,
you.
Rani.
Thank you, Sidharth. So what to understand, actually, Indonesia is actually in an interesting hybrid. So on paper, everything looks centralized, risk-based licensing system, central standards, but the enforcement actually remains heavily regional, especially outside of Java. And I think this is where I see the frictions mostly happens. Sorry. So first, the standard gap, or I would like to call it invisible standard. for some regions. So even if you hold a national license, regional government often add layers of requirements before they let you operate. And because the national regulation sometimes quite broad, each region could interpret it differently. I have an example, and this is something that I actually dealt with before. So based on law, we are required to get one license. But when we went to the local agency, because we need to get their approval, they refused to process it, arguing simply that, oh no, we don't issue that kind of license for your case. And this is not something on our fault, but this is something beyond our power, right? So what happens if years later, if a strict auditor comes down, I could technically be flagged for non-compliance, even though I actually tried to follow the rules. And second is centralized digital data in the central versus data in reality. So even basic license such as land utilization permit, so you need to get those kind of land utilization permit before you actually utilize the land. Ideally, we apply that permit to the government, to the OSS system. And to get this license, they usually check your my locations against their integrated zoning plan. If it matches, then they just issue it automatic confirmation for that. However, lots of zoning plans in Indonesia is not even integrated. Lots of regions outside of Java, and even surprisingly, cities close to Jakarta, like Bekasi or something, haven't fully integrated their zoning plans. And if that's the case, the system kicks you out of the automatic land, and meaning you need to regional recommendation first. And as a result, the process that supposedly take days, it could drag on into weeks and even months, depending on the region who has the data. And I think the biggest frictions for this in Indonesia outside of Java is the overlapping licenses. So spatial planning, like I said before, between regions, it's could sense, it's even inconsistent. For example, it happened in Papua before. So the central government already issued 4 licenses, but because the local community protested because they say, hey, this area overlap with the geopark, the government then redo the checking and they revoke the license, 3 of the licenses just like that because, oh, sorry, our mistake, we revoke your license. And another case, this is actually quite famous arbitration case, Indian metals and ferroalloys versus Indonesian government. So there are multiple licenses were granted over the same land in Kalimantan. The investors then sued the government. However, the tribunal ruled that the tribunal actually already ruled, okay, Indonesian government, you are negligent by issuing multiple licenses. However, the investors still lost the case. And why? Because they say investors failed to conduct a proper due diligence and make sure that the location didn't overlap with another company. So basically, they're saying if you don't check the overlaps yourself, well, the risk is yours. We don't care. But however, I think as Indonesian lawyer, despite this risk, there are things that you can do as a cross-border investors if you want to invest outside of Java. First, clean and clear land check. Verify your chain of title at the land office. Check the physical and official record, not just PDF that you get from the client. Ensure the land is free from encumbrances, claims, and dual ownership. You have to conduct court dispute check as well. Check the relevant courts for ownership dispute, overlapping claims, and any dispute associated with the property. Even map check. You can actually get access from certain ministry for interactive mapping across Indonesia. You can actually check yourself if that kind of area already a geopark, if that kind of area is already forestry, and so on. And even better, and this is I think some practice that our office quite implement, a site visit. I think this is quite important. So maps sometimes or documents sometimes don't show the facts on the ground. I think a license could mean nothing if there are 200 illegal miners or a local plantation already operating there. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that I want to say for potential investors in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nuraini. On that note, we mark the end of today's session. Our sincere gratitude to our panelists, Mr. Kotni, Ms. Kataruka, Ms. Palla, Mr. Nautika, Ms. Kirana, Ms. Nuraini, and Ms. Katili for their thoughtful perspectives, and to all participants and viewers for joining us today and hearing us with such sincerity. Thank you so much, everyone. And it was really
Thank you.
thank you so much.